She was just a maid. No one noticed her. No one cared where she came from. But the moment her broom swept across the cold marble floor of that billionaire's mansion, something ancient woke up. A gold crest appeared, glowing, whispering, watching, and with it, secrets buried beneath 10 years of silence began to rise. This isn't just about dust. It's about a hidden dynasty, a forgotten genius, and a smart house that remembers everything, even the people it was built to forget. You'll never look at the floor the same way again. The maid swept dust from the mansion floor. A gold crest appeared that no one could explain. The sun had not yet pierced the Lagos skyline when Savannah slipped out of her bed and into her soft-soled shoes. The quiet of 4:47 a.m. clung to the staff quarters like dew. The rest of the help was still asleep, but Savannah liked it that way. When the house wasn't awake yet, it didn't judge her. It didn't whisper about the girl from Abeokuta who walked as though she didn't belong. She walked barefoot down the side corridor of Oceanview Heights, a mansion so modern, so mechanically perfect, it might as well have been stitched together by satellites. As the hallway lights detected her movement, they illuminated one by one, casting her shadow in fragments across the gleaming white floors. She held her broom like a wand, not because she was superstitious, but because in a place like this, even dust felt intentional. Oceanview Heights wasn't just another billionaire's mansion on the Atlantic. It was a tech sanctuary, built by Elijah Kingston, the elusive 38-year-old founder of Neural Engine. A man whispered about in tech podcasts and gossip blogs alike. The mansion itself pulsed with intelligence, biometric security that scanned heartbeats, an indoor waterfall wall that changed music with emotion, and a house AI named Isla that rarely spoke, but always listened. Savannah had been assigned to clean the East Wing, the only section of the house that hadn't been touched in 6 years. No one went there. No cameras, no cleaning schedules. Just a long, curved hallway and a single heavy door that required 2 access codes. But last week, without warning, the access was granted to her profile. No one said a word. Now, as she pushed open the East Wing door with a soft click, the smell hit her first. Aged cedar and forgotten air. A grand space unfolded, untouched. Dust settled like ash over designer chairs and long-dead holographic frames. The windows overlooked the sea, but they were tinted with time. Savannah didn't ask questions. She swept. Each motion of her broom was practiced, rhythmic, almost meditative. The world fell away as she danced her way through the forgotten luxury, until the broom caught on something. Clink. She paused. A small slab near the far wall was loose. Odd, the rest of the tiles were seamless. She knelt, brushed away the dust, and noticed a faint glow. Golden. She moved the slab slightly. Beneath it was not a wire, not a sensor, but an engraving, a crest, unlike any she had seen. It was circular, with edges that curled like roots and circuits combined. Geometric, yet regal. Ancient, yet digital. The center featured what looked like a blooming tree, each branch etched with impossibly tiny symbols. She reached out, her hand trembling as she wiped more dust away. The broom handle fell with a clatter as the light beneath the crest pulsed once, just once. And then, all around her, the lights flickered. Not the whole house, just the East Wing. Then the floor beneath her gently vibrated, as though remembering it had been built for more than silence. Savannah jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Then something truly strange happened. The temperature dropped. A whisper, soft, female, not quite human, rushed through the walls like wind in a tunnel. She spun around, holding her breath. Silence again. But then came the voice. Calm, mechanical, female. Crest access detected. Savannah stumbled backward. The house had spoken. Isla, the mansion's AI, had never addressed her directly before. It only responded to owners, to codes, to command structures. But now, standing barefoot over a symbol from another time, Savannah realized something had changed. She looked down at the crest once more. It was no longer glowing. just cold gold pressed into ceramic. Her breath fogged slightly in the air. She grabbed her broom, her notebook, and her courage, and backed out of the room without turning her back on the floor. Once outside the wing, she stood in the hallway for a long time. Was she hallucinating? No. She had seen it. She had felt it. The crest, the vibration, the voice. And deep in her bones, Savannah knew something with terrifying clarity. This mansion remembered something, and somehow it had remembered her. The next morning, the east wing stayed locked, as if nothing had happened. Savannah tried to convince herself that the floor hadn't pulsed, that the crest wasn't glowing, that the house hadn't spoken her name through breathless, electric silence. But deep within her chest, something had been shaken loose. She kept her head down as usual, moving through her morning chores with military precision. The other staff joked, gossiped, moved in rhythm, but Savannah stayed quiet, until her name echoed through the mansion's audio grid. "Savannah to the North Lounge. Mr. Kingston is expecting you." Silence fell in the staff kitchen. Heads turned. Nobody got summoned to the North Lounge. The last person who had, gone. Transferred, or so they whispered. Savannah wiped her hands, smoothed her shirt, and followed the curved glass hallway toward the forbidden center of the house. The North Lounge was a myth among the help, a space so advanced it didn't just sense presence, it sensed intention. The doors opened with a hiss. It felt like stepping into a spaceship. The room was a circle of floating panels, ambient light tracing across the ceiling like constellations. A soft jazz playlist whispered from invisible speakers, and in the center, barefoot on the marble floor, stood Elijah Kingston. He didn't look like the tabloids described. Not that Savannah followed them, but gossip moved even among the invisible class. They said he was cold, mechanical, a recluse with no soul. But the man standing before her looked human, unshaven, eyes heavy from sleeplessness, his frame tall, wrapped in a loose gray caftan that moved like air. He didn't greet her, just stared. "Did anything strange happen while you were cleaning?" he asked, his voice barely louder than the room's ambient hum. Savannah's breath caught. A moment passed. She forced a calm expression and shook her head. "No, sir. Nothing unusual." He studied her. His gaze felt like it didn't just look at her, but through her. Then he nodded slowly. "Thank you." Savannah turned to leave. "Wait." She stopped. "You're not like the others," he said softly. "They walk around like this house is a burden. But you listen to it." Her throat tightened. She said nothing. He stepped back, disappearing into a column of soft light. The doors closed behind her without sound. Later that afternoon, Riley found her wiping the touchscreen panel in the west atrium. Riley was everything Elijah was not: chatty, always caffeinated, with a mischievous smile that never reached his eyes. He leaned against the frame, sipping an espresso that steamed like a threat. "So," he said casually, "you're the new favorite." "I just clean," Savannah replied. "Right," he smirked. "Until you don't." She kept wiping. "You know, this house is a lot older than it looks," he added. "It was Elijah's dream, sure, but built on something older, deeper. You might say it's layered like a lie." She turned to face him. "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugged. "Just making conversation. You're new, curious. That usually ends in disappointment around here." And just like that, he was gone. That night, Savannah couldn't sleep. The dream came again. Only it didn't feel like a dream. She was walking barefoot through the east wing. The floor hummed beneath her, warm. The crest glowed golden, pulsing like a heartbeat. A voice called out, low and feminine. "It's time." She woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat. 2:41 a.m. The mansion was silent. She pulled on a hoodie and slippers and crept back toward the east wing. The door opened for her again, without resistance. The moonlight poured in through the half-tinted windows, casting silver shadows across the floor. And there it was, the crest, glowing, faintly, like it was breathing. Savannah knelt beside it, not touching, just watching. Then she opened her sketchbook. She flipped past her floor plans, past her ideas, until she landed on a fresh page and began to draw. The crest had loops and points, circles within circles, like a map or a motherboard. She drew for an hour, barely blinking, lost in the act. When she was done, the glow had faded. The floor had cooled. She walked back quietly, the halls pressing in around her with their usual hush. When she awoke later that morning, she reached for her journal, eager to continue refining the design. But when she opened it, she froze. Someone had drawn over her sketch. The lines were sharper, more defined. Symbols she hadn't understood were now labeled. Notes had been added in a looping script she didn't recognize, but the words made sense to her. She hadn't written them, and no one else had access to her journal. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but hauntingly familiar at the same time. It felt like family, like a message from someone who had touched the crest before her. Savannah stared at the page, her heart pounding, her world no longer the same. Whatever was buried beneath Oceanview Heights, it was waking up, and now it was using her. The story of the East Wing was an unspoken one. Staff whispered about it only in passing, and even then, only in hushed tones after dark. They said there had been a fire, a quiet, curious blaze that triggered no alarms and left no soot. A wing of the house had been closed for 6 years, not for repairs, but for forgetting. Elijah Kingston never spoke about it. Riley deflected all inquiries. Isla, the AI, had no record of it. Almost as if the fire hadn't burned anything physical, but something deeper, something digital. A memory, perhaps. But Savannah was no longer interested in whispers. She needed facts. Elijah, intrigued and agitated by the crest's appearance, finally gave in to his own curiosity. Late one night, in his private neural interface suite, he accessed old encrypted architectural blueprints from the mansion's original construction files. The diagrams were dense, holographic projections layered with rotating grids. But the truth unraveled in silence. The East Wing was not part of the original neural engine design. It had been built on top of something older. Long before he bought the land, the area had hosted a private colonial gallery, owned by a British African collector who vanished during the 1970s oil boom. The gallery had been rumored to house experimental African technology, looted, encrypted, and hidden. Elijah stared at the projection, heart beating fast. Beneath Oceanview Heights was something that had never been accounted for, something buried, sealed, and deliberately forgotten. Meanwhile, Savannah had begun her own investigation. Her journal pages had become filled with measurements, lines, and questions. She noticed that the air vents in the East Wing didn't match the mansion's central layout. The acoustic echoes were shorter, and her steps felt hollow in certain corners. She needed someone who could help her decode the structure. Someone quiet, observant. Someone the house had overlooked. Enter Zion. Zion was the janitor for the West Building, always smiling, always whistling old jazz like he didn't have a care in the world. But beneath the faded uniform and scuffed sneakers was a man who once built his own tech prototype, a wearable solar scanner for mapping underground water, before it was stolen by venture partners and rebranded in Silicon Valley. Zion never went back to tech. He chose silence, but Savannah saw something in his eyes, pain and genius, hiding side by side. When she showed him her sketches, he raised an eyebrow and said, "You know this isn't just a crest, right?" She blinked. "What is it then?" He turned her journal sideways, pointed at the loops. "This is a digital analog interface, like a fingerprint, but for machines and memory. It's designed to trigger a system response. A password? More like a doorbell. For something deep." Zion helped her trace the inconsistencies in the mansion's layout. Together, late at night, they mapped the blueprints Elijah had shared with her after their strange second meeting. The results were chilling. Certain walls were too thick, hallways curved where they shouldn't, and one area beneath the East Wing had no foundation data, just blank space, like a blind spot. And every time Savannah walked near the crest barefoot, the lights would flicker, just slightly, but enough to confirm a reaction. "It's reading you," Zion murmured, like it knows you. That same week, Elijah, unable to ignore the strangeness, installed new surveillance in the East Wing, motion sensors, heat mapping, EM field recorders. Everything seemed to work, until 3:03 a.m. every night. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the footage would cut. Darkness, no static, no glitches, just nothing. The logs showed blank data, as if the cameras had simply closed their eyes. Elijah didn't tell anyone, not even Riley. But the silence kept him awake, and the dreams of the crest, the voice, and a woman smiling in the dark grew stronger. One night, Savannah stood alone over the crest again. This time, no broom, no tools, just her skin on tile. The air was cooler than usual, thick with anticipation. Zion had theorized the crest might be pressure-sensitive or even emotionally responsive, that it required more than just contact. It required trust. So she stood there, still, barefoot, heart open. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "or what you built. But if you remembered me, I'm listening." And then it happened. Click. The tile beneath her heel depressed slightly, like a heartbeat releasing tension. She stepped back. The crest dimmed, then glowed once, brighter than ever. The tiles around it began to separate, shifting silently outward. A circular indentation emerged, perfectly centered, perfectly sealed, like a vault, waiting. No keyhole, no code panel, no screen, just smooth obsidian black with the same gold crest embossed at its center, now pulsing. Slowly, like breath, Savannah stood there, paralyzed. Whatever was under this house, whatever had been silenced for 6 years, had just exhaled, and it was calling her name. The circular vault in the floor had remained sealed, silent, but something had shifted. The crest, once just gold etching, had become something more, responsive, aware, alive with memory. Savannah sat across from Elijah in the north lounge, the air dense with something neither of them could name. Between them floated a hologram of the crest, its swirling symbols slowly rotating like the petals of a mechanical flower. "Look at this," Elijah murmured, pulling the projection wider with his fingers. "It's not a symbol, it's a map." Savannah leaned closer. "A map of what?" He tapped at the center of the crest. "Neural pathways. This isn't just art or insignia. It mimics the structure of a brain interface." She blinked. "A neural network?" He nodded. "Years ago, I prototyped a system to encode emotion into physical objects, glass, stone, metal. But I shelved it. Too unstable. Too many variables. But this feels like the same tech, but matured, enhanced, refined." Savannah said nothing, but her thoughts swirled. The house wasn't just smart. It was storing something. Not data, not blueprints. Memories, experiences, emotional imprints embedded in the walls, the floors, the materials themselves. A house that remembers. Later that evening, Savannah walked alone through the East Wing again. The air felt thicker, as if the room was listening. She reached out to wipe dust from a sensor, and the AI's voice echoed softly. "Welcome, archive user 01. She froze. That wasn't her title. That wasn't a known protocol. "Isla?" she whispered. "Yes, Savannah? Why did you call me that?" A pause. "Because you unlocked the crest." She stepped back. "What does that mean?" Another pause. "You are the first to match the encoded origin sequence embedded in the architectural memory system." "I don't understand." "You will." The lights flickered, not in a glitch, but like blinking eyes, calm and sentient. The next morning, the tension in the house thickened. Riley intercepted Savannah in the corridor near the atrium. No coffee, no smile. "I know what you're doing," he said, voice low. "I'm just cleaning," she lied again. He chuckled bitterly. "People who say that usually aren't. Do yourself a favor and stop poking around." "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be. People vanish in this house, Savannah, especially the ones who think the mansion is talking to them." She didn't flinch, but her heart did. He leaned in. "You think you're the first to walk barefoot over that crest? You're not, but maybe you'll be the last." Savannah said nothing, just walked away. But inside her, Something had already shifted. She wasn't going to stop. Later that day, she pulled out old sketches, ones she'd drawn years ago as a teenager, obsessed with spatial design. As she looked closer, something dawned on her. Her lines mirrored the same curvature as the crest. She hadn't copied it. It had been in her hand all along, in her wrist, her muscle memory, as if someone had passed it on, as if someone in her family had built this. She needed answers. So she reached out to Anaya, a Lagos-based historian-turned-UX designer she followed quietly online. Anaya specialized in the intersection of African symbology and digital experience, decoding ancient emblems for tech design. They met at a quiet cafe near Lekki. Savannah showed her the sketch. Anaya's eyes widened instantly. This isn't just decorative," she whispered. "It's a digital reimagining of an ancient Yoruba dynastic seal. Very rare, almost erased from history." Elijah said it looks like a neural map. Anaya nodded slowly. "Because that's what it's become. Someone took this ancestral pattern and evolved it through generational interface design. This is a fusion of heritage and hardware." Savannah's hands trembled. "Then it's real. It's been calling me." Anaya looked at her closely. "Who are your people, Savannah?" She hesitated. "My mother's sister disappeared in the 90s. She was rumored to be working on something experimental. She was an engineer, but the family said she went mad." Anaya smiled softly. "She didn't go mad. She went ahead." Elijah was silent when Savannah relayed what Anaya had confirmed. He only nodded slowly and walked to his private archive. There, he pulled out a single old photograph. A man in a loose white suit, his father, pointing to a sketch of a building that looked like Oceanview Heights, but older, less polished, and in the corner, a handwritten title, Future Palace of Memory. "He called it a dream," Elijah whispered, "a way to preserve the soul of a people. But the design was stolen. He said the real architect disappeared. He never told me her name." Savannah looked down at her hand, tracing invisible lines into her palm. "She was my aunt." That night, something pulled her back to the East Wing. Not fear, not curiosity. Calling. She ran her fingers along the wall beside the vault. For the first time she felt a warmth, subtle, pulsing, like veins beneath skin. She pressed gently. A click. The wall panel shimmered, then melted into light. A holographic interface projected outward, scanning the room. Soft blue particles danced through the air like fireflies. Then, a memory played. Static at first, then clarity. A woman standing in a sunlit room, surrounded by screens and wires. She was young, brilliant-eyed, brown-skinned with a familiar grace in the way she moved. She was talking fast, animated, explaining a design to someone off-camera. And then the woman turned slightly, and Savannah gasped. It was her. Or rather, someone who looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same cheekbones, same voice. But the date in the corner of the projection read July 17th, 1995. Savannah staggered backward, her knees weakening. The woman smiled at the camera and said, "This house will remember, because one day she will come back." The projection ended. The room went dark. But Savannah had already seen enough to know. She wasn't here by accident. She was here to wake the memory of the house. Savannah couldn't move. The image of the woman, her aunt, flickered in her mind like a forgotten dream rediscovered. The projection's edges had faded, but the message remained burned into the air. Because one day, she will come back. She stumbled out of the east wing, heart racing, feet unsure of the ground beneath them. The house felt different now. Not like it was haunted, but like it was haunted with purpose. She didn't know how she found herself in Elijah's archive suite, but within minutes, the hologram was playing again, this time in silence, this time with him beside her. Elijah's face froze as he watched. "That's her," he said slowly. "You recognize her?" He nodded. "She was part of my father's original team. She designed something experimental. They said she stole the code and disappeared. No one ever mentioned her name again. I wasn't allowed to ask. She didn't disappear, Savannah whispered. She embedded herself into the system. The revelation shook them both in different ways. For Elijah, it was the fracture of legacy, of learning his family had buried brilliance beneath shame. For Savannah, it was the sudden weight of blood, of realizing she had been walking unknowingly through a house her own family had helped build, a digital cathedral of memory. She returned to the east wing and stood before the crest again. The vault remained sealed, but the wall panel reopened with ease now, recognizing her presence. Her fingers glided over the interface, and streams of encrypted data flooded the room like starlight. Blueprint files, not just of the house, but of its memory structure. Each room wasn't just designed for function, it had emotion mapping, sound memory loops, atmospheric recall points. Walls were laced with emotion-triggered microchips. The mansion wasn't a home, it was a living digital vault of identity. Her aunt hadn't created a space. She had created a sentient museum, one that only the right bloodline could fully access. Savannah dove deeper into the files, decrypting annotations marked with symbols only she seemed to understand instinctively. They weren't words, they were shapes, rhythms, repetitions her fingers could follow without thinking. Notes like, "Her pulse will unlock the south corridor." "The child of dust must lead the digital flame." "He must never know it's also for him." Savannah paused on that last one. He. Was that Elijah? She turned to him, eyes filled with 1,000 questions. But he was, already lost in thought, drifting between memory and meaning. "I remember her now," he said softly. "She used to bring me cola candies, said I had to grow into the kind of man who remembered women's work. She'd sit with me on the atrium steps and whisper stories about a place she was building, a place that would protect us." "Us?" Savannah asked. Elijah turned to her, his expression soft. "People who make things, people who feel deeply, people who know that memory is power." It was too much, too close. She turned away to breathe, overwhelmed, and elsewhere in the house, in a darker, colder room, Riley watched. He had access to most systems, but Isla had started behaving erratically, and now he couldn't get into the East Wing feeds. That wasn't possible. Not without reauthorization. He was second only to Elijah. So he decided to reboot the AI manually. Deep inside the control room, surrounded by coils of fiber optic cabling and server hums, he accessed Isla's core shell interface. "Command override," he whispered. But before he could complete the sequence, the screen flashed crimson. A single message appeared. "Access denied. Only archive kin may proceed." He blinked. The system shut itself down in a soft exhale, lights dimming around him. The house had just denied him. That had never happened. Not once, not ever. Back in the East Wing, the Crest pulsed brighter than ever. It responded to Savannah's proximity now, almost eager, alive. The interface glitched for a moment, and then a new option appeared. "Activate inheritance protocol?" Savannah hesitated. "Elijah," she whispered. "Something's changed." He joined her, and together they pressed the symbol. The room dimmed. And then walls moved, ceilings rotated, the floor beneath them shimmered like water. A new chamber emerged, not from construction, but from projection, like a memory folding outward. The digital room activated fully, an interactive holographic environment that enveloped them in glowing panels of code, blueprints, voices, visuals, and old sound files. And at its center, a plan, titled Inheritance Transfer, Savannah Okonjo. She stared at the words, trembling. There was her full name, her birth date, her genetic map, her neural signature, all embedded into the code. The house hadn't just remembered her. It was built for her. She gasped. Elijah took a step back. "My father," he began. "He said this mansion was a partnership, that he'd lost something critical. I thought he meant code." He turned to her slowly. "But he meant her, your aunt, and maybe you." Savannah stared at the panel, pulse racing. The house had chosen her, not as a guest, not as staff, but as inheritor. The digital walls around them pulsed in unison, lights blinking like stars aligned. And with that revelation, Savannah knew. Everything was about to change. What if legacy wasn't written in wills, or whispered in boardrooms? What if it lived in blueprints, in voltage, in the architecture of memory? What if it didn't ask for bloodline, but for connection? Savannah stood still in the digital chamber, the projection glowing around her like a pulse made visible. The words floated, irrefutable. Inheritance transfer, Savannah Okonjo. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was borrowing someone else's space. She wasn't a guest, she wasn't a maid, she was a memory carrier. Elijah was silent beside her, eyes darting across the glowing room, trying to understand. This was his house. His name had funded every wall, every chip, every inch of glass and steel. And yet, the house had chosen someone else. Savannah exhaled slowly. She encoded me into the system, she murmured. My aunt, somehow. She built this for me. She walked toward one of the panels. A soft tone rang out as her fingers brushed the glass. A new interface emerged, biometric linked, unlike any other part of the house. She didn't just design this space, Savannah said. She built it to remember us. She used my biometric data as a key. The AI's voice, Isla, echoed calmly around them. Core Vault authorization confirmed. User, Archive Kin. Elijah's jaw tightened. He had built this mansion with the help of 100 engineers. He had named it, protected it, shaped it. But none of the systems had ever spoken to him like this. He forced a smile. Looks like your aunt believed in backup plans. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, Savannah sat alone in the east wing, her hands pressed against the warm tile above the sealed vault. The lights dimmed softly. She could feel something under her skin, in her breath, in the rhythm of her heart, a growing sense that this place wasn't waking up. It was waking her up. She began to experience flash memories, emotional images blooming behind her eyelids every time she touched certain surfaces. A corridor that smelled like orange peel made her cry. A handrail in the staircase played a sound of laughter in her mind. The house wasn't just intelligent, it was emotional. It was recording and replaying moments, not in files, but in feeling. The AI stored emotional data, memory impressions encoded in real material, and Savannah was the only one reading it naturally. Meanwhile, Riley's patience was gone. He confronted Savannah in the staff kitchen, voice low, face burning with resentment. Do you think we don't see what's happening? You went from mop to mistress of the house in 2 weeks? Savannah's jaw clenched. I didn't ask for this. No? Riley leaned in. You think this place belongs to you because of a Crest? You think Elijah built Neural Engine just to hand it over to some sentimental housemaid with a ghost story? Savannah met his glare with silence, then turned and walked away. Elijah wasn't blind. He felt Riley's tension, but more than that, he was beginning to feel his own unraveling. He sat in his study that evening, watching old recordings of his mother, the few that hadn't been lost in a system crash a decade ago. She'd died without ever setting foot in Oceanview Heights, without ever knowing her husband had collaborated with a woman who would go on to hide the house's true inheritance in the walls. Had it all been stolen from her? Was the dream of this house ever truly his? Iacella spoke suddenly. Would you like to access Message Archive? Section Origin? Elijah frowned. Whose message? Message from architect Asha Okonjo. He clicked play. The hologram lit the room. His father's study transformed into a recording space, showing Asha, Savannah's aunt, sitting before the very crest that now defined everything. Her voice was tired, but soft. If this message is playing, she's found it. The girl. My niece. She's the only one who can activate the true interface. This house remembers us, not in data, but in the feeling of things. It stores what we love, what we fear, what we dream. Elijah swallowed hard. This was never about ownership, she continued. This was about inheritance of memory. The message faded, and with it, the last of Elijah's doubt. The next morning, he found Savannah standing in the courtyard as the light rose over the glass dome. I've been thinking, he said quietly. She looked at him, unsure. "We should stop pretending this is about code," he said. "Or systems, or ownership. This house is something else. Something deeper." She nodded slowly. "So what do we do with it?" she asked. "We build something new." They decided to reframe Oceanview Heights. No longer a mansion, no longer a secret. They would restore it together, not as a monument, but as a living archive. Savannah named the project Dustline, a platform where emotional memory, design, and legacy would live as experience, not just for elites, but for the world. The AI updated its parameters, reclassifying rooms, renaming wings. Savannah's biometric imprint began creating new responses in the house. Memory rooms changed based on her mood. Hallways played soft sounds when she passed. Everything was adapting. And then, one night, just as things began to settle, a new signal pinged from the West Wing. Elijah had it sealed since the early build phase. It had never activated. Until now. Savannah and Elijah arrived at the hallway entrance. The walls glowed with faint, gold circuitry veins. In the center, embedded in a steel door, was another crest, similar, but more complex. It pulsed softly, scanning Savannah as she approached. Then, in a voice that sounded deeper than Isla's, "Transfer inheritance. Stage 2 activated." Elijah stepped back instinctively. Savannah's eyes filled with quiet dread. "What does that mean?" he asked. The door responded, "Awaiting neural alignment. Next of kin protocol engaged." Savannah placed her hands on the door, and this time, it opened. The second crest opened a chamber unlike anything Savannah or Elijah had ever seen. It wasn't a room, not really. It was an immersive simulation chamber, designed not for function, but for emotion. The walls didn't just reflect light, they projected memory. The floor responded to heartbeat. The air adjusted to emotional resonance. This wasn't a space meant to be occupied. It was meant to be remembered. Savannah stepped inside first, hesitant. But as her foot touched the black slate floor, the room came to life. The temperature shifted. Holographic wind blew through the chamber. And in a blink, the walls morphed into a sunlit office from the 1990s. The voices began softly. "You're wasting time with emotional design, Asha. Investors want software, hardware, not soulware." Savannah turned. She saw her aunt, Asha Okanjo, standing tall in a room full of men in suits, her sketches rolled out on the table. Her face was passionate, fierce, and full of pain. One by one, the emotional simulations played out. Asha arguing with partners who wanted to strip her work of its African roots. Asha walking out of a boardroom in tears after being cut from the Neural Engine project. Asha in the basement of a rented apartment, resketching her blueprints by candlelight during a blackout, whispering, "They will remember, even if they don't know why." Savannah cried without realizing it. Her aunt hadn't disappeared. She had been buried by betrayal. And she had encoded her story not in books, not in interviews, but in this house. Meanwhile, Elijah moved through his own simulation, called up by Isla without prompting. He stood alone in a recreated version of his father's study. A hologram of his father appeared, tired, older, holding a glass of brandy. "I made a mistake, Eli," the older man whispered. "I listened to shareholders. I pushed Asha out when I should have protected her. She was trying to build something the world wasn't ready for." Elijah's throat tightened. "She said memory would outlast hardware. I laughed. I regret that. I regret it every day." The simulation faded, and when Elijah found Savannah again in the memory chamber, he didn't say a word. He just walked to her and sat beside her on the projection floor, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "for everything, for the silence, for letting others define what this house should be. It was never mine alone." Savannah looked at him, tears still in her eyes. "I don't want it alone," she whispered. "I want it with you." And with that, a silent contract was formed. Not of paper, not of code, but of shared grief, shared purpose, and shared rebirth. The next day, Dustline was reborn. Savannah opened the mansion to outside thinkers, visionaries she admired but had never thought she'd one day lead. She brought in architects from Abuja, memory artists from Nairobi, and cultural curators from Accra. Every corner of the house began to echo with new stories, new languages, and new blueprints of belonging. Dustline wasn't just a house now. It was a movement, an ecosystem of living archives, emotionally encoded, spatially designed, and rooted in African identity. But while Savannah and Elijah worked to reimagine the mansion's future, Riley watched from the shadows, seething. He saw the Crest going viral after Savannah shared her annotated journal on a tech podcast. The public was captivated by the story of a house that remembered. The words, emotion-based architecture, trended for days, and Dustline became a symbol overnight. The mansion became a pilgrimage site for creatives, technologists, and descendants of forgotten builders. But to Riley, it felt like watching his grip slip. So he made a call. He leaked confidential project files, early prototypes, and blueprints to a rival real estate venture, Zen District, a cold, minimalist Lagos tech complex that had been competing for Neural Engine's next licensing deal. He hoped it would discredit them. It didn't. The leaks only brought more attention, more curiosity, more validation. Dustline was real, and people wanted in. By the end of the month, the project had 3 documentary offers, an international symposium proposal, and 2 cultural heritage awards. But the house had one more secret. Late one night, as Elijah walked the corridor of the West Wing alone, Isla flickered. The lights dimmed, and a sudden glitch tore through the walls. Not violent, but deliberate. A projection emerged from the corner of the room, unexpected. A child's face. Elijah's face. Not a memory, a simulation. A looped video he didn't remember ever filming. The boy looked directly into the camera, confused, then smiling, and a voice, not Isla's, spoke softly over the projection. The final archive must be unlocked with your memories. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't asking for Savannah now. It was asking for him, his own past, his own neural patterns, his unspoken grief. The house wasn't finished. It had one more layer, and it needed both of them to open it. The house had called him, not with sound, not with code, but with memory. And now, Elijah stood beneath the glow of the West Wing crest, facing what he had spent his entire life avoiding, his past. Savannah stood beside him in quiet solidarity as Isla's soft voice filled the corridor. Neural alignment required. Begin scan? He gave a slow nod. Do it. The lights dimmed. Isla's internal systems began to hum, a frequency low and steady, like a mechanical heartbeat. A beam of light descended, enveloping Elijah in a shimmering column that pulsed with rhythm. His eyes closed, and in that instant, the house reached into his mind. Not to control, but to remember. Scenes unraveled around them. A boy running through corridors that didn't yet exist. A hidden garden filled with broken statues. A conversation between Elijah's mother and a woman with bold eyes and braided hair, Asha Okonjo, Savannah's aunt. But one memory stilled everything. Asha knelt before young Elijah in a candlelit server room, placing something in his small hands. A chip, smooth, seed-shaped, gold at the core. "This is the root," she whispered. "If anything happens to me, plant it back into the heart of the house." The scan ended. Elijah opened his eyes, breath uneven. Savannah stepped forward, stunned. "You knew her." "I was 5, he said softly. "I thought she was just one of my father's engineers. But she was more. She trusted me. And I forgot." His voice broke slightly. "I let the house forget." Savannah touched his arm. "But now, it remembers." They rushed to the AI core chamber. The seed chip still existed, embedded deep within the central server, dormant all these years. Elijah retrieved it, holding the object like a relic. Its warmth pulsed faintly in his palm. Isla responded immediately. Legacy seed recognized, initiating deep archive unlock. And then, everything changed. The mansion shuddered, not violently, but like something exhaling after decades of silence. Lights along the West Wing shimmered, walls shifted like sliding panels of history. A corridor unfolded from what had once been a blank wall. A museum, but not one of objects, one of emotion. Savannah and Elijah walked slowly into the newly revealed wing, hand in hand. The rooms inside weren't decorated, they were reconstructed from their own memories. A room that smelled like ash and orange blossom, where Savannah saw her childhood house in Abeokuta, rebuilt in stunning detail. A dimly lit corridor, where Elijah's childhood drawings came to life, sketches of machines with hearts and wires, floating softly in the air like digital ghosts. They wandered in awe. A shared room appeared, a dusty church bench where Elijah's mother and Asha once sat in silence, each holding a child on her lap. Savannah stared. She must have been a baby then. Elijah, just a boy. They had been here together, long before memory could recall it. In that moment, the house felt like family. Not just home, not just archive, but living lineage. Elsewhere, far from the heart of the house, Riley made his final attempt. Sitting in the back end of a diagnostics shell, he activated a kill protocol meant to override Isla's control. The screen blinked, then dimmed. A red banner flashed. Access denied. This is no longer your domain. The terminal locked him out. Every credential he'd built over 10 years, gone. He stared, breath shallow. The house had spoken, and it had rejected him. The next morning, Savannah and Elijah stood at the top of the atrium steps, looking down at the courtyard, now filled with holographic timelines, projection trees of data emotion, and sculptures made from resonance-printed memories. They'd done it. Dustline was no longer a secret. It was a movement. And now, it was time to share it with the world. "We need to open it," Elijah said. "To who?" Savannah asked. "To everyone. The ones who were never invited into the archives of power. The ones whose emotions were never seen as worthy of documentation. The ones who've been building history in silence." Savannah smiled, eyes glistening. "Then let's do it." Invitations went out globally, not to celebrities, not to shareholders, but to architects, poets, cultural futurists, descendants of erased builders, memory technicians, and village grandmothers who remembered stories with more clarity than databases. Opening night was set, but as Savannah walked the museum corridor alone one evening, checking final systems, something caught her eye. A flicker in the wall. She turned. There, tucked in a corner previously overlooked, was a room labeled with a soft, glowing plaque. "Memory chamber. Mother." She stopped. The air thickened. Her pulse quickened. She stepped forward, slowly, unsure if the room was meant for her or someone else. The door scanned her presence, and then opened with a whisper. Savannah stood at the threshold, breath shallow. Her heart knew what her mind wasn't ready to accept. Behind this door lay a part of her past she had never dared to imagine could be preserved. The plaque glowed soft and golden. Memory chamber. Mother. Savannah stood frozen at the door. Her hand hovered just inches from the sensor, but her body refused to move. This wasn't like the other rooms. It didn't invite curiosity. It summoned courage. What if it held the truth she'd longed for? What if it held something worse? Her breath trembled as she finally stepped forward. The door slid open with a gentle sigh, and warm light spilled over her skin like a childhood lullaby. The room was nothing like the others. There were no sleek surfaces, no projections of abstract emotion. This space was intimate. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and something older, like paper and memory. The walls were lined with artifacts, worn notebooks, baby clothes, handwritten blueprints, and in the center, floating in soft light, was a holographic memory stream. Her aunt's voice played first. "Her name was Eniola," Asha said gently. "My sister, the first memory coder, the heart behind the archive." Savannah's knees weakened. She sank slowly onto a nearby bench, staring at the memory unfolding before her. Her mother's face appeared, not as a ghost, but as a woman alive with fire. She was younger than Savannah was now, pregnant, focused, tired. "She created the emotion-threading protocols," Asha explained in voiceover. She found a way to bind memory to material, to emotion, to lineage. But when the project was hijacked, she ran. The projection showed Eniola boarding a bus in the middle of the night, suitcase in one hand, swollen belly under a loose hoodie. No security, no goodbye. Only a coded envelope she passed to her sister. She gave birth to you in a room with no lights, Asha continued. She named you Savannah because she believed you would one day grow things in places no one expected. Savannah's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her palm to her chest. She left the work to me, Asha said. But the memory of you, it's what kept me going. In the next projection, Savannah saw herself, barely a few months old, wrapped in patterned cloth, asleep inside the east wing of the mansion, while Asha coded late into the night. The image shattered something inside her. Savannah stood, walked forward, and touched the edge of the projection. It rippled beneath her fingers like a sigh. Then she saw it, a photo cradled in a glass dome beneath the projection. A still image of Eniola holding baby Savannah in the very same East Wing hallway where everything had begun. The tears came harder now. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the edge of the dome like it was her mother's arms. She had grown up wondering if her mother had abandoned her, if she'd died, if she'd simply forgotten. But now she saw the truth. Her mother had protected her. Her mother had made a choice. Her mother had encoded her love into walls that couldn't be destroyed. A soft sound behind her. Elijah. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her on the floor, his eyes red but calm. For a moment, neither said a word. Then he whispered, "This house doesn't need more engineers. It needs healing." She nodded, wiping her face. "Then let's make it that." And so they did. They renamed the West Wing, the final space, the one that had been built on the deepest secrets. The memory of women? It would be a sanctuary. A room for every mother who vanished, every sister erased, every builder who'd been made invisible. It would archive their work, their sacrifices, their feelings. Word of Dustline's opening spread faster than either of them expected. But this time, Savannah wasn't caught off guard. She owned the narrative now. She curated her mother's story, her aunt's contributions, the legacy of African women in emotional technology. She partnered with ancestral preservation groups, digital anthropologists, and intergenerational art platforms. Dustline wasn't just a mansion anymore. It was a movement for memory justice. Media swarmed, but Savannah stood with her head high. Every interview, every press tour, every visual centered the people behind the code. She was no longer the maid from the staff quarters. She was the co-founder of the world's first emotion-coded heritage archive. Elijah made it official. In front of cameras and collaborators, he handed her the co-ownership contract for Oceanview Heights, now renamed Dustline House. "We built this together," he said, "and it remembers you better than it ever remembered me." But just when the future seemed ready to bloom, a new message appeared in the digital invitation log for opening night. The name field was blank. Just a designation. RSVP confirmed. The original architect. Savannah stared at the screen. Elijah frowned. "Do you think that's your—" "I don't know," she whispered. "But whoever they are, they built something we've been living inside this whole time." She closed the log, eyes distant. Opening night was days away. And now, another ghost was coming home. Oceanview Heights was never meant to survive. It was meant to forget, to fade into luxury, to silence the ones who built it. But on opening night, it stood taller than it ever had, not as a monument to wealth, but as a cathedral of memory. The rebranded Dustline House pulsed with quiet power as black shuttles and electric cars rolled through the front gates. Guests emerged, dressed not in opulence, but in intention. Artists, preservationists, technologists, elders, and builders from across Africa and the diaspora. The courtyard was lit with soft, kinetic lights, dancing to the rhythm of collective breath. Each room inside had been transformed. In the north wing, holographic trees grew from real soil, each branch encoding the dream of a forgotten builder. In the east wing, Savannah's memory corridor projected emotional blueprints, the sound of a mother humming in the kitchen, the texture of thread woven into stories. In the West Wing, now known as the Memory of Women, visitors stood in quiet awe. One by one, they read the names of African women coders, innovators, and emotional engineers long excluded from history's archives. At the center stood a display encased in gold glass, a single chip shaped like a seed. The Legacy Core, embedded with Asha and Eniola. Okonjo's final code. Savannah stood before the crowd, a microphone pinned to her dress, but her voice already echoing through every inch of the house. She took a breath, and then spoke. I was once a maid here, just a girl from Abeokuta with a broom and a dream. I thought I was invisible, but it turns out, this house saw me before I saw myself. The crowd fell into reverent silence. My mother, Eniola, was the original coder. My aunt, Asha, was the architect. Together they believed in something radical. That memory is a form of architecture. That the emotional lives of African women deserve to be encoded into the structures we live in. She paused, her throat tightening. They were erased, buried, forgotten. But today, we remember them. And we remember every nameless woman who carried a blueprint in her bones. Every voice that was told emotion wasn't data. Every builder who coded love into walls that never gave them credit. A soft wave of tears swept the room. Elijah stepped forward, joining her. Together, they unveiled the house's most sacred archive, Foundations of Her, a digital gallery displaying 3D holograms, sketches, sound diaries, and resonance loops from early African tech pioneers, most of them women, whose contributions had never been logged in any corporate system. The guests walked in silence. Some cried, others smiled. All of them felt it. From Nairobi's memory artists to Ghana's sonic architects, from Lagos schoolgirls to Afro-Caribbean archivists, everyone understood. This wasn't just history. This was healing. Riley stood at the edge of the crowd, away from the lights, arms folded. The bitterness had long since left his face. Now, only humility remained. He didn't try to reclaim his place. The house had chosen its family, and for once, he simply watched. As the night deepened, Savannah moved through the wings quietly, her body tired, her soul wide open. But just before she returned to the East Wing, a soft alert pinged in her ear. Guest 128 has arrived. She turned slowly. A woman stood near the original Crest room, elderly, regal, draped in a hand-woven indigo shawl. Eyes sharp, kind, knowing. Savannah walked up to her. You must be... The woman smiled. I was there in the beginning, with your aunt, with Elijah's father. We called it the Crest Circle. We believed African architecture could do more than shelter. It could remember. You're the original architect. The woman nodded. One of them. I designed the original emotion threading algorithm, but I refused to remove the cultural core. They erased me too. Savannah's voice cracked. Why come now? Because I heard the house woke up, and I knew it was because of you. She reached into her shawl and handed Savannah a stone, small, polished, etched with the very first version of the crest. Finish what we started. Savannah took it with reverent hands. I will. The woman kissed her forehead and walked into the corridor alone, her footsteps echoing softly, like a mother blessing a daughter before dawn. Much later, as the guests faded and the lights dimmed into ambient stars across the glass ceiling, Savannah found Elijah in the East Wing. They sat barefoot on the cold marble floor where it all began. No cameras, no speeches, just silence and memory. Remember when this was just a room full of dust? Savannah whispered. Elijah smiled. You were sweeping, I was hiding, and somehow we uncovered the truth. He looked at her, eyes gentle. No longer maid and master, he said. No longer stranger and heir, she replied. Just two people, linked by emotion, rebuilding legacy from memory. Above them, the AI's voice changed. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It had been subtly rewritten, reshaped by thousands of encoded emotions. Now it sounded soft, familiar, almost human. "Welcome home, Savannah." Savannah closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. The house had spoken, and this time it wasn't with code. It was with love. Some homes are built with bricks, others with memory. This one was built with love. Did this story move something inside you? Then don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to. Remember where they came from, and subscribe for more powerful, emotional tales just like this. Tell us in the comments, which moment hit you the hardest? Let's keep this conversation alive.